There we go. Awesome. So yeah, as I mentioned, I met John actually on a Zoom meeting, much like this with Aaron. And I was working for a nonprofit here in Steamboat, and I was blown away. Before I get into his bio, I was blown away by the fact that they were doing this, and that was five years ago. Wow. Um, and I was like, yes, let me hop on this. Whatever you all are doing, I want to be a part of it. So let's dive into it. I'm glad to be here. John is the founder of Hinman Pie, a Denver bakery turning out sweet and savory pies made with Colorado ingredients. He also started CHOW, as I mentioned, Culinary Hospitality Outreach and Wellness, to support mental health in the hospitality world. Trained in the quote school of hard knocks, end quote, John has spent his career baking pies, building community, and finding ways to make the industry a little kinder and tastier. And over to you, John.
That was a great intro. Thanks, Chris. Um, hey, everybody, I'm John Hinman. It's awesome to be here. And I thought I would talk a little bit about how this all started, where I'm at today, what I've kind of been through, and what I'm doing today to try to curb my enthusiasm a little bit um, for what ails me. Um, so uh, I started in the restaurant business in 1997. It was it was not, food is not a passion of mine. I'll have to say, still isn't really a thing. Like, I got into this industry kind of by accident. I got a job as was in art school, and I got a job as a server as a restaurant. And on my first day, I dumped, those big 32-ounce tumbler or whatever they are, Pepsi cups. I dumped 8 of those on a customer. And so I found myself in the kitchen that night peeling garlic, and I just loved it, man. I was a party kid. I was full on alcoholic when I arrived, unbeknownst to me. But I mean, that was my deal. There was sharp things, there was fire, there was knives, there was Metallica on the radio, there was beer taps across the line. It was like, okay, these are my people, and we could stay out all night and do the restaurant deal, especially how it was in the 90s, which is, I had a kid say to me the other day, "You were born in the 19s," and I was like, "Geez, it's crazy to hear that, Um, so yeah, I started out as as a savory chef, and we opened Vesta Dipping Grill back in the day and worked there, until the turn of the century. But it was 3 of us pretty much in the kitchen. There was Maddie, who was just barely 21, and he was the brains of all the food. There was this dude Gabe, who was older than us. He was like 30 or something, which was old, but he knew how to make things in big batches. And then there was me, who was a little bit seemingly more organized. So I did all the ordering, learning how to cook, scheduling, that kind of stuff. And, we were a trio with, a few other helpers, and, we just did the deal. It was 12, 15-hour days, whatever it took to get the job done. But in a matter of no time, within a year, Vesta was the #1 restaurant in Denver. And man, it just gave us a free pass for several years to pretty much go do whatever we wanted in this town. At this time, the town was a lot smaller. So anyways, there was a lot of partying. There was, a whole bunch of mistakes. I was bouncing, in and out of jail and detox for one reason or another. If I didn't have a warrant out for my arrest, I was working on one. If somebody had a warrant out on their arrest, I was working on it for them. Because there's a whole story of getting pulled over and saying I was my brother, and turned out he had a warrant out for his arrest. So I did all his DUI shit, even though I had an outstanding DUI, but that's a whole nother story. But I was crazy. I put my car on the Wash Park Lake. There's a whole list of goofy shit that I did. in the past, just trying to fit in, you know. So fast forward to all that, 37 years old, face down on mom's couch, facing 4 years of prison and for multiple DUIs and no job, virtually homeless. And man, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had been sober before. I got sober around 2000 and managed to put together about 6 or 7 years. And I stopped going to, started going to AA, the first time I got sober. And I stopped doing that after 2 years and said, oh, I can live by these principles. And several years later, I was back in it again, and I wasn't done until I lost my house, my business I had at the time, and everything. So I got the mom's couch. So I went to treatment again to the same place, and the universe works in a really funny way. I went to the same treatment center in Estes Park. They gave me the same bed in the same cabin with the same jobs at the same surrender flag. When I got out, I got the same shitty Honda Civic. I started my business. I had started another business. I was sober the first time when I was like 4 or 5 years sober, and everything tracks to today. The only difference is I live my life a little bit different today, and I stay more connected with my other groups. And that's made a big change. And so coming back in, I swore off the restaurant business. And, in the first year of sobriety, I had 9 jobs. And guess where I wound up? Back in the kitchen. And I started making pies for a local chicken factory, chicken shack. And had a little argument with the chef about $35, which that wasn't about. And I said I quit and left. And net worth at that time, I wasn't allowed to drive. I was riding a bicycle. I was living with a basset hound in a 15 by 10 room in some lady's house in Lafayette, Colorado, in her basement. And that's all I had. And I had this fun group. So I was like, okay, I'm going to open my own, screw you. I'm going to open my own bakery. Net worth $250. What am I going to do? Just terrified, but I knew I couldn't be in that restaurant anymore. And so the day goes by, and my check shows up from the IRS, my refund check, and I was like $3,000. And I'm like, I can live off this for a year. So I took a minute and came up with a business plan. Got some money, and I bought a business that was in a 13,000 square foot bakery. And holy moly, I went from a 3x5 table to 13,000 square feet with 28 employees, all of which spoke Spanish, and I didn't speak a lick of Spanish, and I don't know shit about bread, but I figured I'd learn. Like it was a bread factory. And man. And I had come back to Denver. And before I left, I was a pretty popular pastry chef. So these magazines wanted to write these articles about my success of being sober and buying this big, successful bakery, which was like about to kill me. And this is where CHOW comes in. Coming back in, and my roles changed a lot. I was out doing sales. I was going in the back doors of the restaurants all over Denver. And I started to see my old eyes looking back at me. I was scared at what I was doing, but because I was in a different place, I was sober now, but I was seeing my old, really scared eyes looking back at me. And a writer called me, and she just wanted to do yet again one of those rah ha ha interviews, and I wasn't up for it. I said, I'll tell you whatever you want to know about me, but this shit isn't easy. This is really, really hard. This might be the hardest thing I've ever taken on. And I said, my caveat is 30 days after this article comes out, I'd like to open the doors to the bakery and see if anybody wants to come talk about where it hurts and just talk about it. So the days are creeping up on us, and we're not getting much response. And I kind of pat myself on the shoulder on a Thursday. I was like, "Oh, good job, John. You tried." And the meeting was on a Monday. I already get kind of given up. And I think it was on a Friday, and the news came that Anthony Bourdain passed away. Like the timing was perfect for CHOW, awful for Anthony Bourdain. And suddenly on that Monday, there was 40 or 50 people at the bakery, and I really didn't know what to do. I was kind of overwhelmed, and I said, "Hey, go around and talk about, why you're here, what you do, anything you want." That meeting went on for 4 hours, and during that meeting, I learned earlier to listen for the similarities. So I grabbed a notebook and started writing down all the things that I heard in that meeting. And the CHOW preamble that you read every day are all based off the notes I took from that very first meeting. So those are all the things I heard in that meeting, and that kind of set the mission for me. And next to me, there was a girl who was knitting frantically. And I was super kind of paying attention to her because in Longmont AA, there's a wall there. At the time, there was this like 5 ladies that were all knitting, and they'd put their knitting down and profoundly change their life and just get back to knitting or something that they said. So I'm like hyper focused on her. And she puts her knitting down. She's the very last one, and she gets up and she said, "Hey, if this meeting sucks, this is my plan to end it today." And she laid out her plan, and the room lit up and surrounded her. She's alive and well today, and I actually spoke to her about 2 weeks ago, and I still have the hot mat that she made at that meeting, and that's how. And I just said, "Hey, I'll be here next Monday." And next Monday, 15 people showed up, and we just had this like loosey-goosey kind of fun meeting going on, and pick topics and get to know each other, and it was really helpful. My goal was not to get anybody sober. That's my problem. That's not your problem, but we all show up with problems. And the biggest thing that CHOW has taught me is that I drink, somebody else in the room might overeat, somebody else might have sex things going on, somebody else might be self-harming. I don't know, but I feel like that all that stuff is just the exhaust to where it hurts. It's what we do to calm ourselves. A lot of those things, alcohol worked for me for a very long time. It made me sociable. It made me get out of myself until it didn't, and so I wound up on mom's couch. If there was a place in the whiskey bottle that I could mark with a marker that hit me perfect, I'd find it, but I was always going past that mark to find that mark. It didn't count up anymore. So, that's kind of the elevator pitch on CHOW and why we're all sitting here today. I mean, it was a pretty amazing day, and I had no idea that this would happen. But the benefit of it was, we had practice a couple of years before COVID kicked in. And so when COVID kicked in, I've been collecting donations. I wasn't collecting, people were giving me donations. And I had a desk drawer full of money because I knew CHOW would change the second I put the money in the bank. And so I was kind of holding on to it because I didn't want it to change. There was a great spirit going on there, and I didn't want to mess it up. But 2019, like literally on the 30th of December, I decided to, get a quick 501c3 and put that money in the bank. And thank God I did, because COVID came and we were able to accept donations. CHOW was there. I had Aaron on the phone. I was trying to save my business, and people were calling me about CHOW, and Aaron was in my ear asking if she could do this and if she could do that. And I was like, just be the director, and the universe just put this whole thing together for us. It wasn't, we didn't make a choice. We didn't have a choice. This is what we were going to do. And here's what the choice had been made for us. And we were able to bring these meetings online like we're here today, and it was awesome. So I think I wanted to share, I really want to share about, kind of where I am today. I think that's important because because it is, because I still hurt a lot. And I'd rather today, in some moments, I'd be rather be facing that judge who was going to sentence me to 4 years. Seemed easier than some of the stuff that I'm facing today. With this crazy stuff going on, out there in America, that we're getting so torn apart with each other that we can't even agree that, Russia is our enemy. To the fluctuating business right now. I'm a wholesale pie guy, and I rely on the restaurants. I'm like the little fish on the shark. And the restaurants aren't doing so great right now. And that's an effect. And for the first time, I'm hearing at the Boulder Farmers Market, man, these things are expensive. And I haven't raised prices in like 2 years. It's freaking me out a little bit. And I had a really big account with the hospital that was 5,000 pies, and they asked me for $20,000 less with the same amount of pies last week. So I can't do that. I've been thinking about it, and I can go get some pie bucket slop and some pie shells and start the generic pie company and knock those pies out, which, if I started the generic pie company and made that, I'm sure I'd make $1 million. No problem. That's the irony in my head. But I've had to pivot, and this idea is coming from my heart voice, my head voice. I want to get into this a little bit. I got two brains in me. I got one up here and I got one in here. And this one is like a committee of freaking dictator squirrels, and everybody's got the best idea. And everybody is telling me, go over here, go left, go right, go, bah, 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 bah. And I latch on to them like a fool. And I run myself into a brick wall, or I get myself onto a hamster wheel, and I'm off and running it in some direction. And it usually leads me right back where I started, either okay or a little worse off than I was. But I had learned a lesson, some sort of lesson, but I didn't learn the whole lesson, right? And so I was sitting around the other day, what am I going to do? And my heart's like, the kids, man, the kids. And so I did this fundraiser program with Red Rocks Elementary, and the kids buy the pies a little bit higher than wholesale, and then they sell them. And last year they raised like $5,000. And I was like, huh, if I could get 20 schools on board with this idea, I'll make the gap. So I'm in the middle of this pivot right now, and I'm scared to push I've been using AI a lot, and I'd be happy to share with anybody how that's helped out. And that's kind of a different topic, but I've been really using it as a tool, not to mess with pictures or anything like that, but it's been huge help. So I got it to find me all the schools within a 50-mile radius of Denver. It got me all the principals' emails, and now I just have to launch this thing. And I'm terrified to do it. I think part of me thinks it's going to be a failure. The other one thinks it's going to be such a success. I don't know how the hell I'm even going to operate it if I get what I think. So I'm in this paralyzation point. Meanwhile, the days are passing by, and there's some other big decisions that I have to make with a loan and some other stuff. And I got to make these decisions before these decisions are made for me. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten myself stuck in paralysis because I'm overwhelmed that the decision has been made for me. And I usually don't like that decision. So those are some of the, but I've been through this before. I was kind of writing down ideas for this and thinking about my history. And I've survived this before. I survived COVID. I've survived a 13,000 square foot bakery closure and my building getting taken. I've survived me, 25 years of me drinking and using myself and that, so if I do the things I was taught to do when I got here, I will be okay. And I have to keep telling myself that. I have this little saying that I say, it's, help me set aside everything I think I know and lead me to a new experience. Help me get there. because I can't do this stuff on my own, ever. I have to use that little quiet heart voice that says, go ahead and have that meeting and start CHOW. Get gutsy with that, with the writer, you know. CHOW's taught me it's not that hard to nudge the world. And it's really not. You know, we all have a purpose here. We might not, it's not always clear to us what it is. I still don't know mine all the way, and I don't think that we ever will. But we find out our purpose when we show up, when we have the courage to actually, you know, show up. And you know, and I say 14 years sober, I want to talk about some of this stuff a little bit. And it's like, wow, seems like a long time. He must be really healthy. And, you know, I got a disease, you know, this is stuff that comes up for me every day. I don't want to drink every day, but I tend to behave a lot of the times like the 15-year-old that took that first drink. And I'm starting to realize recently over the last year and really trying to work on it that I made really smart decisions when I was a 15-year-old boy to protect myself from whatever I was afraid of. And I wasn't up against, I was afraid of the world. I wasn't up against any personal abuse or anything like that. I was bullied a lot in school. And that there was threats from there, but I made some really smart decisions as a 15-year-old to protect myself from whatever was going on at the time, or to help me be who I had to be in order for you to like me. Really good. You know, I've got a whole bunch of Billy Joel strangers going on inside of me. You know, we all have a face, but we guard the danger, he says, you know, and I can show a different masks to a different person. I can show up as the CHOW guy. I can show up as the pie guy. I can show up as John. And showing up as John is it's the hardest one. I keep trying to get into these relationships. Not a lot, but I struggle with personal relationships, intimate relationships. I'm learning, you know, because I'm living by these rules of a 15-year-old. And so trying to come up with new ways to live and understanding what I'm going through. And that has been a big change lately. Another big thing that happened to me this year was my sponsor of 14 years has been afflicted with dementia. And that's totally freaked me out. You know, I came up with the story that in my head, I make up stories and I believe them, and then I speak them. It's crazy. And, you know, and I made up the story that if his mind goes, my mind goes. He's the only guy that knows me. What am I going to do? And so I started working with a couple of other people and chopped them up and spit them out. And I found somebody new that I've been working with for the last couple of months, and it's jiving, and I'm getting those tools back that got me here in the first place. You know, I've been on a little wander, I think, for a couple of years. And I think I love that you guys have been carrying the where it hurts message, and I think I want to expand about where that comes from for me, and why I brought that to this meeting. And so where it hurts, like when we talk about pain, you know, physical injuries are really obvious. You break your arm, everyone sees it, you know what happened, you go to the hospital, you go get it set, you go to the, you know, the guy who makes you do all the bendy things, and it really freaking hurts, but eventually it heals, and 2 years later you're down the line and making the joke, hey, remember when I fell off the ladder and broke my arm? Oh, that really sucked, but ha ha ha, you shouldn't have worn those shoes that day, blah blah. You know, and it's past. But with mental and emotional pain, the injury is invisible. You know, I've spent years of knowing that I've had wounds on me on the inside, and then just putting band-aids on them. You know, whatever that looked like. You know, if it was alcohol, that was a band-aid. If it was a lie, that was another band-aid. If it was, you know, whatever the band-aid was, whatever that would just help me get through the day. And that injury for me shows up smack dab in the middle of my chest and my heart, and it feels like a pressure sometimes that's gonna explode, or something crawling under my skin. It's this really super tight nervous energy. And you know, that's That's pain that I can't see, but it hurts as bad as a broken arm, if not worse. And how do I heal that? How do I heal that hole in my soul? That's the pain, my soul, you know, and I got this big hole in my soul and I'm stuffing it with all these outside issues, trying to find John, you know, I'm stuff, and I still do it today. You know, I started building RC cars a couple of years ago and I got like 12 of them. I only have 2 hands, you know, and I'm not driving them anymore. And then I get into this other thing and I start filling that hole with this other stuff. And then I start filling it with camera shit. And then I start doing this and I start doing that. Um, you know, I can't stop it. I can stop it if I stop, but I start filling it with things that I think that I need. And, you know, more work, more projects, more things. But the truth is, I'm the one that has to jump in there. And myself, and usually I try to take a friend, you know, a witness. They don't have to do the work for me, but I try to bring a buddy, somebody I can talk to and say, hey, I'm feeling this right now. Somebody with some experience with a little bit of facts that they know with themselves, you know? And I have to be able to show up for what's inside me, naming what that is and asking for help. You know, when I first got here, I sat on this guy's couch and he's like, John, are you happy, mad, sad, or glad? And all I could do was freaking cry because I had no connection from my heart to my brain to whatever, to what happiness felt like other than smiling. But was I even smiling? I don't know, you know, until I learned, and this is at 30, 40 years old, you know, learning how to connect these dots within myself to give me these emotions, you know. And it's still happening like that. I still have a 15-year-old John kicking around, trying to control a 51-year-old got, you know, seemingly business owner, you know. And so that's kind of where it hurts for me. It hurts in my soul. And the only way to heal it is to talk about it and to talk about where I'm at and listening for my story coming out of your mouths. It, you know, I would not be here today if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for somebody else down the street, because I realized that I wasn't alone. And the second that we realize that we're not alone and somebody else has been through that, you got something to latch onto and there's a little sense of hope. And maybe I can get out of this today. Maybe I can get out of this next week. Maybe I'll try to do what he or she does. So that's about where it hurts, you know, for me. And when the squirrels get too loud, you know, I try to pause and write down what's agitating me. I say that little prayer, help me set aside everything I think I know and lead me to a new experience. I'm looking down when I read it because it's right there on my computer. You know, I need this reminder all the time. My computer looks like a flower of Post-it notes all over the place. Some of them have been here for years. I don't even know what they say. That one's always right there in the middle. And some other things, you know, I've been attending more of my recovery meetings lately. I've been trying to get out of myself and listen to other people. And when I do that, things start to line up for me because I keep jamming myself up with all these, with the squirrel dictatorship up there. Always trying to get me to the next deal, you know? So, what else I want to talk about? But the truth is, you know, I am where I am today. And I might not be in a restaurant working on a line every night anymore, but I'm in this business and I've become this walking, talking pie syndrome. Like I'm the skinniest pie guy I know, you know, but I'm full of it. I'm full of pie. Fortunately and unfortunately, this business has been like a kitchen. You know, I got to be here all the time. I've got to answer the phone. My name isn't John. My name is Hey John, you know, all the time when I get to work. And and people expect me to have answers and be an expert. Meanwhile, you know, they ask me a question and I have to like go on a walk in and Google something, you know, I don't know, I'll figure it out, you know, or ask the AI. And man, I'd be happy to come back and just talk about that, using it as a tool, because I've got that thing now predicting the farmer's market for me every Thursday. It sends me an email. It checks the weather, what events are going on in Boulder, and it says you should make the following things. That used to take me half hour to do and guessing, and it does it in 5 minutes, and I just have to print the thing and it's out. So there's like all these little shortcuts for my ADHD squirrel dictator brain that won't overthink the problem and just get the job done. And that's something that's been super helpful for me. And you know, but what I've learned is, even in the hardest times, there's no better place than the bathroom floor to get up from. You can only go from here, is what they say in some groups, but I'm not on the bathroom floor today, maybe my office floor, but I can always get up. But if I rely on my old beliefs, I'm going to stay stuck. I've got more stuff to learn, and it takes what it takes to get me to learn. And so I will repeatedly do the same things over and over again until the heart voice finally wins. You've got to trust that heart voice. What it's that voice that says, you shouldn't do that. You should pick that up. You should not talk that way. It's like that mother. And what if you did take the chance? What if you did pick up that piece of litter, and you opened it up and it was, a winning lottery ticket? Who knows? And your life has changed immediately. So I can't stress enough to take a chance. Take a chance on you. Take a chance on that voice in your heart and see what happens. Because every time that I do, CHOW is a great example of this. Here we are. This went well beyond. 70s in Italy. Italy, a little like hour meeting of 15 people on a Monday night with no rules made its way to Italy, and Washington, D.C. So it's not hard to nudge the world, it's not, especially with that little heart voice. So if I hadn't have followed that, we wouldn't be here, So if you're having a hard time right now, don't be afraid of it. Ask it what it's trying to teach you. Try that next little step, no matter, sometimes it's baby steps between the baby steps, but it's a step forward. There's days in February I can't get out of bed, but if I decide to roll over, I moved. Some days that's all I can do, and so, the hard times aren't here to break us. They're just the raw material that we need to shape us to be better people and to help each other. And I think that's what we're all here for. So with that, I'll pass. So is there time for people to talk?
Yeah, we have a few minutes. Thank you,
Okay,
John. That's
sorry.
amazing. Yeah, no, that's amazing. Really appreciate it. Um, I hear a lot of my story and other stories in what you say, present, past, and future. Um, so it's just an honor to hear it.